From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Thanks very much, Ollie. Barrett. Eels in Loch Ness in Scotland. Who'd have believed it? You well, how are things? It's Thursday. It is September 5th, 2019. My name is Richie Allen. Hope you've had a good Thursday. I've got a terrific programme lined up for you today. Tweet me, it's at Richie Allen Show. Love to hear from you as usual. Lots to talk about, but sure, when is there not lots to talk about, I ask you?
Richie Allen.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Now, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth have teamed up with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and they've run a 4-year computer modelling initiative, and they believe that they can prove conclusively that World Trade Center Building 7 did not collapse because of fire back in 2001. Kevin Barrett is no stranger to you. Kevin is he was one of the earliest people to challenge the 9/11 narrative, and he did it on national television, going up against Fox News anchors before most people knew what was going on. Kevin Barrett joins the programme to talk about this. I did reach out to Richard Gage, my old pal from Architects and Engineers, but it was very, very late in the day when I did that last night. We might hear from Richard on the programme next week. And Meria Heller, the brilliant journalist, one of the oldest podcast on the internet. Excuse me, check out Meria.net. Meria Heller joins the programme in the second hour. Jesus, hang on a second while I grab some water. Oh, a bit of a frog there came upon me all of a sudden. Hang on. Oh, yeah. Lovely. Yeah, I was choking a bit there, wasn't I? Yeah, so Kevin and Meria joined the programme this Thursday. It is September 5th, and it is 2019. Oh, God. I've had my holiday, and I enjoyed it, and I'm fresh, and I'm in good form. But today, for some bizarre reason, has some kind of end-of-term feel to it. And I'm not going anywhere, believe you me. I've had my holiday. We're a bit giddy around today. Well, 'tis mad, really, isn't it, what's going on? I did say to you this morning on the YouTube live stream, I wouldn't dwell too much on Brexit, but sure, you know, we've got to bring you up to speed. I've used the term soap opera to describe how all of this is playing out. Not only how it's playing out, but how it's being reported as well by the mainstream media. So, I just find it gets madder and madder. Wait till you hear some of this stuff. Wait till you hear it. Mad. Tonight, the Johnsons on Dynasty. Boris Johnson's baby brother left the Conservative Party today. Joe Johnson, who bears a striking resemblance to Johnny Lawrence of the Cobra Kai, will retire from politics altogether after the next election. No more politics for Joe Johnson. And he did it by tweet, apparently. Kay Burley, that's our Kay, made a little wee-wee in her knickers. She was that excited. What's it like, Kay? The news that Joe Johnson has knifed his brother in the front. Kay.
Fabulous.
It's all good.
What was that, Kay?
Fabulous.
It's all good.
It's all good, is what it is. So, Kay, sum up the Joe Johnson story for us, Kay.
Much more coming up here on the Kay Burley Show. On the Brexit crisis facing Boris Johnson, we'll be discussing the government's next steps after a series of damaging defeats this week, including his brother saying, nah, don't fancy serving under your government.
Nah, don't fancy serving under your government. That's the news in 2019. Johnson's sister Rachel, the journalist and the Brexit Party candidate, is inconsolable. And Boris Johnson's father, Stanley, can't be reached at the moment for comment as he is away playing cricket in India with the Crankies and Little and Large for a BBC documentary. Tonight on Dynasty. It's some shit show, this, isn't it? Yes. Starring Joan Collins as Kay Burley. Yes. 'Tis mad. 'Tis absolutely mad. She's having a great day today, Kay Burley. Today is Kay's day because She's as mad as a box of frogs. I think we've pretty much settled on that. She had Brexit Party MEP Lucy Harris on the programme, and some guy who tweets called Femi. Now, Femi is the black Joey Essex. He's got to take out his dick to count to 11. Effectively, he's not too bright, is Femi. He's a Ramoner. A bit on the dim side. Apparently he has a law degree, but he's not got a Scooby-Doo about the European Union or what he's talking about. Femi. That's how they introduced this guy, Femi. And he was on with Brexit Party MEP Lucy Harris. I won't play you the entire exchange, but Burley was flirting outrageously with Femi, who kept shouting down Brexit Party MEP Lucy Harris. He was behaving elfishly, and Burley was wretched. Watch it back for yourself later on if you don't believe me. Anyway, Lucy Harris soon had enough of Kay Burley and Femi.
However, most Brexit voters do not like that. The Brexit Party has put out graphics to say that they do not like that. Nigel Farage has said it's the worst deal in history.
And the only way we can resolve this is to have a general election. Agree or disagree?
Or a referendum is the way to do it.
Referendum.
Would a general election just be on Brexit?
I think it would be on many different things, but I absolutely think the fundamental question would be on Brexit. Absolutely.
So the most precise way of finding out what people actually want is a referendum, is it not?
This guy carried on like this throughout the entire interview, shouting over Lucy Harris, was getting agitated.
We should have people that represent people.
Why do
you not want to have a referendum?
So Burley jumps in on the side of Femi, who she's got eyes for, and asks Lucy Harris, why don't you want a referendum?
Why does Femi not want to have a general election?
Because I just explained.
Why don't you want to have
Because we've already had a referendum, and we've seen what the referendum has said.
But did it say that you can't have another one? Why can we not have more than one?
Well, let's have 5. Let's have 10. Let's go for it. Let's have 50.
Let's
have one.
It's silly.
It's not.
Well, it's not being a bit silly, Kay. How many referendums do you want? Or referenda do you want? Do you want the best 3 out of 5? The best 5 out of 7? The best 11 out of 21, maybe? Why not? Let's just keep having referenda.
Let's have one. Let's have one every day until we get what we want.
You're asking that.
Good girl, Lucy.
That argument is crazy because you're asking
for
for the third general election in 4 years. I'm asking for a referendum.
You have no idea which way I voted, by the way.
Okay, sure.
I'm asking
Which way do you think I voted?
I think you voted Remain.
Do you?
Okay, yes.
Do you?
Yes, I absolutely.
Do you?
Absolutely.
Should I tell her I didn't vote or not?
Burley looks at Femi, this fuckwit Femi, and says, should I tell her how I did vote or not? She looks at Femi, and then Burley declares that she didn't vote at all. Burley is, well, obviously a pathological liar.
Have fun.
I didn't vote.
So now you've got the host and Femi laughing at and mocking the other guest, Lucy Harris. Listen to Burley.
Okay.
You're supposed to be able to, in this country, you should be using your vote. You have to be able to use your vote in this country to have a healthy democracy.
And maybe I was using my vote by not voting. I'm entitled to do that. I'm also an impartial journalist, and so as a result,
Okay.
You don't think I am?
I don't think you are, Kay. No.
Okay, thanks for joining us on the programme this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking the time. I actually looked at an Ofcom report the other day that suggested that Sky News was the most trusted news service in the country as far as broadcasters were concerned.
What's that? Sky News. Sky News. Rupert Murdoch. Sky News is the most trusted news service in the country, really?
What kind of fuckery is this?
Lucy Harris pointed out Burley's obnoxious behaviour and her obvious slanted attitude in the interview, and the first thing Burley did was just got rid of her. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on. Having a great day today is our Kay. Coming up for 12 minutes past the hour, the Richie Allen Show for Thursday, September 5th, 2019. Philippe Lambert. Philippe Lambert. Oh, that's Philippe Albert. Yeah. Philippe Lambert. Belgian too, though. Philippe Lambert. Philippe Albert scored a wonderful goal in a 5-0 victory for Newcastle over Manchester United that I had forgotten about until now. But Philippe Lambert is a Belgian MEP, and he is on the European Union Brexit steering group, whatever the feck that is. He was on BBC 4's World at One programme today, and I made a little wee-wee myself in my underpants laughing at this because he was asked by Sarah Montague, he was asked, would the European Union like an extension? Would the Irishman like a drink? Here's a BBC 4 worded one.
Because we've had this bill now passed through the Commons, which requires the Prime Minister to request an extension to Brexit unless Parliament agrees to a deal or backs no deal. Can you see any circumstances in which the EU would refuse an extension?
No.
No. Are there any circumstances in which the European Union, which does not want the UK or anybody else to leave, are there any circumstances in which they would refuse an extension? No. Oh, it is mad. It is. I can see some of your tweets. It is. This is insane, this. Anyway, expand a bit, Philippe Lambert, on the EU Brexit Steering Committee. Expand.
I do not believe that the 27 would take responsibility for pulling the plug and thereby provoking no-deal Brexit. At this point in time, I think this will not happen. So in other terms, if whatever British government comes back with a request for an extension, it will be granted. I think that the right
Even
way...
if there isn't a reason given?
Well, but there will be a reason, because anyway now we know that we are headed for a general election. If Boris Johnson were the statesman he claims to be, he would say, my fellow compatriots, I realize that I do not have a majority for my preferred option, which is no-deal Brexit. There's no majority for whatever solution. So what I propose is that we seek more an extension from the European Union to allow us to call a general election to settle the matter.
There you are. There you are. I know. You're depressed, aren't you? Those of you who believed that the UK would leave the European Union and didn't pay any attention to what I've been telling you for 3 years, you really held on to the idea that we might leave. You're a bit fed up now, aren't you? Because you can see it basically dissolving in front of your eyes in pretty much the manner I described it over the last 3 years, and I take no pleasure in it. This is how it works. Listen to Sky News' Lewis Goodall explain a plausible way that Jeremy Corbyn could find himself temporarily in residence at number 10 Downing Street without actually winning an election through a no confidence vote in Boris Johnson's government. This is actually feasible, that Corbyn could end up in number 10 without an election. I'm not saying it's going to happen at all, but Lewis Goodall explains it. Shirts is just mad.
We don't talk much about the idea of emotional no confidence, or we haven't much over the last couple of weeks, but I wonder if it's entirely dead, in the sense that there is clearly a scenario which I think the Labour Party might be working towards now, which is to say that Boris Johnson is forced to remain in office, they refuse him a general election, then the Benn bill kicks in, compelling him to extend Article 50, or ask for an extension to Article 50. Boris Johnson then has a choice to make. Either he is humiliated because he has to ask for that extension, something he has set himself against so resolutely, or he refuses to obey the law, at which point Jeremy Corbyn, still in Parliament is still sitting, can swoop in and say, my word, this is truly appalling, isn't it? We've got a Prime Minister who's refusing to obey the strictures of Parliament. I think it's time we have emotional no confidence, and I'm the only one, aren't I, that can really replace him, because of course I have given everything to you. I scratch your back, the smaller parties, perhaps you will scratch mine, and relations are now more cordial to make that more of a possibility in a way that it simply wasn't only a couple of weeks ago. That could be quite difficult, of course, for people like Luciana Berger and Chuka Umunna, who have set themselves so completely against Jeremy Corbyn, but they will now be part of the Liberal Democrats, accepting the Liberal Democrat whip, and presumably will have to do as they're told.
Yeah, there is a set of circumstances through which Corbyn could find himself ensconced in number 10, but look, it's unlikely to happen. It's been some laugh today. I've been trying to watch the cricket work, and I do work. You know, I'm not twiddling my thumbs, you know. I've been watching it all. Watch the news later on if you can. Watch the bizarre scenes outside Westminster today on the Common. When Luciana Berger, it was like something from the Sound of Music. I'm laughing now when I think about it. Did you see it? Luciana Berger is Jewish and is a fishwife. She's been screaming about anti-Semitism for ages, and she left the Labour Party. Bruce Willis, I'm about ready to tell you my problem now. Go ahead, Luciana. I see anti-Semites. They're everywhere. When I go to bed at night, anti-Semites. That's Luciana Berger. So she left the Labour Party. She's an independent now. And she's joined the Liberal Democrats. And it was an absolutely hilarious bit of video caught by the BBC today when Berger spied Joe Swinson, who's the leader of the Lib Dems, and ran across the green like a scene from The Sound of Music and embraced her like two teenagers that were going to have a sleepover. Honest to God, it is absolutely surreal, this. Even me, and this is my field, this, journalism, how it works, I'm just scratching my head going, what in the name of bejesus is going on? I see anti-Semites there everywhere. Patricia Braunschweiler, friend of mine and a great supporter of the independent media, says that wee-wee is running through, a theme running through the show today. Do you know, there's an advertisement running on national television here in the UK about incontinence. Incontinence pads for women. And it's young women in the advertisement. It's young women saying that, you know, sometimes there's a little bit of leakage. And I'm like, and I said to the future Mrs. Allen, I said, is that a real thing? Like, I said, I know it's a real thing for older women and older men, but is it a real thing for younger women? A little bit of wee-wee escapology. And she said, I'm not going to tell you what she said. Something along the lines of, well, it happens to me every time you say that you'll bring out the bins or something stupid like that. But yeah, there are ads running for incontinence pads for very young women. 19 minutes past the hour. Keep the tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show. That's the Twitter handle. Coming up on the programme a bit later on, Maria Heller will join me. Looking forward to that. Lots to talk about with Meria. We'll kind of get a kind of US perspective on the big stories of the week. But in a few minutes' time, because of the University of Alaska teaming up with none other than Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, that's a big story, which of course the mainstream media is completely ignoring. We shouldn't ignore it, and we won't, so we'll get into it with none other than Kevin Barrett soon. Hi to William Henderson in Scotland. How you doing, William? To UK Courier, who says it can be absolute hell if you put too much starch in your shirts. That's in reference to a very stupid picture that I posted earlier on that was sent to me by John some months ago of me and Kay Burley outside number 10 Downing Street. Thanks, mate, UK Courier. Appreciate that. Hi to these even are the damned. Forgetting to pronounce my THs there. Hope all is well with you. Hi to Mawinga. And let me scroll on down there. Hi to Paul Alawi, who says, nice to know that Kay Burley is an impartial journalist. I never knew she was impartial or that she was a journalist. You learn something new every day. Mad Monk tweets that he's found the opening to the show very funny. We're living in an alternate world right now. The media is showing its true colours. What a shit show. Sky News is a reality television programme. Yes, it is. Do go to richieallen.co.uk. Look at some of the archived articles. I've written extensively on the mutation of the media. The mutation, we can say. From a time when a rather bland-looking man or a rather bland-looking boring woman. Jean-Anne, remember Don Coburn? Remember Coburn, Jean-Anne? Remember sitting in front of the camera and just telling you a few facts. Or a few facts understood by RTE's journalists. That's how it used to be. Very bland, very grey man or a grey woman would sit there and tell you some stuff. They wouldn't slant it in any way or try to give you or induce or inject some pathos into it in any way. No, they wouldn't. No, they would just tell you. This happened. That happened. It's over to our correspondent who's got some facts and who's got both sides of the story. We've got the militia and we've got the government. And you think about it what you will. That's how it used to be. Now, of course, well, it's anything but that. Hi to Faisal. How you doing, Faisal? You're jealous, Richie, that Kay was flirting with Femi. She was flirting with Femi. Hi to Charlotte in Burnley. Hi to Base and Ninja as well. Hi to Alan Badger. How you doing, Alan Badger? Thanks for listening to our programme. And to Sean Inchcliffe, who asked me about the Chief Whip Amanda Milling shoving Tory rebel Nigel Adams back to his seat. I didn't see that, Sean. But if you've got a link to it, my friend, send me the link and I'll have a look at it. The King of Rock and Roll, then. It's the King of Rock and Roll on the Richie Allen Show. This is Elvis Presley. Welcome. The King, Guitar Man on the Richie Allen Show. 25 minutes past the hour or thereabouts. Thanks for the tweets, loads of them. How significant is this? We talked about this yesterday. We know that World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed into its own footprint on September the 11th, 2001 at 5:20 in the afternoon New York time. We also know that the vast majority of people in the world, at least I think, don't even know about that. We know that the crime scene was contaminated. We know that it was pilfered by the city because the debris was removed and destroyed, preventing any real forensic investigation ever taking place. What's fascinating is that some very good friends of ours, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, partnered with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and they've just released a report based on a 4-year computer modelling study of the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. And they've concluded, and it's terrific because we've known it all along, that WT7 didn't collapse because of fire, but rather because of the near-simultaneous failure of every column in the building. You don't need to be introduced really to my guest who's going to talk about this. He's largely responsible for waking, I would say, millions of people up, and that's not an exaggeration, to the fact that the 9/11 story is horse manure. And he did that because he was asking his students, he's an academic, a writer, a broadcaster, he's a polyglot, I believe he speaks many languages, he's a bit of a genius. Back in his teaching days, he had the temerity to ask his students, not to tell his students what to do, but to ask them to keep their minds open about things like September the 11th and to look at all the evidence. And because of that, the national media in the United States decided that he had to be destroyed. Of course, they failed to destroy him. But he was a very early realizer of the nonsense story that is the 9/11 story. And I've always loved him for that. Let's welcome back to the programme our friend Kevin Barrett. Kevin, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, I'm well, Richie. It's always good to be with you.
Thanks, my friend. How significant is this Alaska Fairbanks report, which was done in conjunction with the architects and engineers? Is it significant?
It's very significant. But before I explain why, let me just say that in your introduction, it sounds like you were, like everybody else, kind of accepted the media talking point that I was teaching 9/11 Truth to my students, which actually was not true.
Oh, no, I know you weren't. I know that.
Yeah, I never even brought up 9/11 in the classroom. I just talked about it on the radio.
Yeah, that's right. And some of your students asked you about it. That's how it went. Isn't that right?
No.
It
had nothing to do with that. They'd spun it that way, but that was a complete lie.
I stand corrected. Sorry, Kev. My apologies. Mea culpa. I stand corrected. You know what? I always thought that students had asked you about it and you'd done the right thing, which is to say, listen, look at various sources for your news, keep an open mind. That's what I thought, but I was wrong. My apologies.
No, I was doing teach-ins, public teach-ins at the university, but I didn't bring any of that into any of the classes I taught, although I was scheduling a class on Islam where Nafiz Ahmad's work was going to be part of the 1 week devoted to considering 9/11 from various perspectives. But if they hadn't witch hunted me, I'm not sure my students would ever have ever figured out what I thought.
How ironic. You never let the truth get in the way of a good lie. So the media did what the media does, which is lied. But by you doing those Fox News interviews, which I bring up often with other guests, it definitely alerted a lot of people to the controversy around the commission report, which was disowned by the lawyer who basically signed his name to it, Thomas Keane. Thanks for that, my friend. So you think it is significant then, the University of Alaska report in conjunction with architects and engineers? Why is it significant?
Well, it puts immense scientific gravitas behind what we already know from 5th or 6th grade physics, which is that it is beyond unlikely that 47-story building 7 would come down with an absolute free fall acceleration for the first 2.5 seconds and near free fall acceleration for the rest of its 6.5 second fall through the path of most resistance for any reason but controlled demolition, taking out all of the vertical supports at exactly the same time. So it doesn't tip over sideways, which is what would always happen. Every collapse that's not a controlled demolition in all of history has always been progressive, slow developing, asymmetrical. Typically, the building tips over sideways. And that's the only kind of natural collapse that's even really conceivable. Anybody who looks at the video of Building 7 coming straight down with a crimp at the top, beginning the whole thing as the central core columns are taken out, can see that this is a controlled demolition. So, but the trouble is that, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? Me, that is the voice of authority, has been putting out these ridiculous lies, totally different stories about what happened to Building 7 over the years. And it's been tough getting the technical community, scientists, engineers, people in universities to go there. And now they have no excuse for not going there because the most detailed scientific study yet is out there, and it's proving beyond any doubt that what we see with our own eyes is true. This is obviously controlled demolition.
Absolutely right. Now, it's lovely to talk. When I say it's lovely, I don't find anything nice or funny about it, but it's great to be talking about Building 7 because I'm willing to bet that a lot of my listeners, until yesterday, because I obviously get a lot of more commercial mainstream listeners who come to the show through other platforms like TuneIn and like Fab Radio. And maybe yesterday, maybe the day before, even though I've talked about September 11th many times over the years with you and others, maybe they didn't know anything about Building 7. Building 7, Kevin Barrett, by the way, at Truth Jihad on Twitter. Go to truthjihad.com. Brilliant broadcaster, writer, and academic. Tell me this. Remind our listeners, Building 7 was very unusual. What was it used for? What was going on in Building 7?
Well, Building 7 housed some of the most secure U.S. government facilities in the United States. It had the CIA's New York headquarters, which is the second most important CIA base in the world after Langley, Virginia. And it also had various other highly secure operations going on there, including I think it was the Securities and Exchange Commission's investigative and criminal wing, which housed all of the Enron documents, among other documents on corporate malfeasance. So this was one of the most highly secured buildings in the world. And indeed, it had the emergency command headquarters for the city of New York up on the 23rd floor. And that's where everybody should have gone immediately as soon as the World Trade Center was apparently hit by a plane. And so many people did, in fact, start there, but they were told, no, sorry, we're going to change location for the emergency headquarters for no particular reason. And a couple of people didn't get the message, including Michael Hess, who was a Rudy Giuliani security guy, and Barry Jennings, who was Hess's assistant. So those two went into Building 7 thinking that they were going to that 23rd floor meeting on what to do about this emergency. This was after the towers were hit. And they got up there and it had been hastily evacuated. There were half-eaten sandwiches, steaming cups of coffee, but nobody was there. They got on the phone and were told, get out of there immediately. So they started going down a stairwell and suddenly, boom, huge explosions. This is before the towers were demolished, ripped out the stairwells and opened up these huge holes in the building. Now, this was in the morning of September 11th, before the towers were hit. Remember, the towers came down at 9:58 and 10:23 or something in the morning. So this was even before that. Very early in the morning, Building 7 was being bombed with apparent pre-demolition explosions.
Kevin, is that undisputed? Because again, just for listeners who are new to all of this, you saying that there was an earlier explosion at Building 7 which housed all these investigations, these SEC investigations. Fascinating, this it really is. Is it undisputed that there was an explosion, a big explosion, as you described, in Building 7, even before the towers came down? How do we know that? Just remind our listeners.
Yeah, we know that from the testimony from Barry Jennings before he conveniently died with no cause of death given, almost on the exact date that the official Building 7 study from NIST came out. And at the exact same moment that the BBC, which has been running 9/11 official propaganda pushback against the truth movement forever, did a hit piece, or rather, a hit piece on the truth movement that sought to try to discredit Barry Jennings, but it didn't really discredit him at all. Barry Jennings is on record and on film very cogently describing his experiences that morning, including that huge explosion. As he left the building, the firefighters finally heard their cries for help through a broken window and rescued them later on that morning. And he described stepping over bodies in the lobby of Building 7. Now, the official story of Building 7 is that nothing happened to it until it suddenly came down for no particular reason at 5:20 in the afternoon. But here we have Jennings giving absolutely credible testimony on video describing the contrary. And then he was either killed or maybe put into witness protection right at the time that the Building 7 NIST report was released.
And remind our listeners, Kevin, remind our listeners again, I know I'm asking you to repeat what you've already said. It's not for my benefit, it's for the listeners' benefit. Remind our listeners, what was Barry Jennings doing in Building 7 again?
Well, once again, Building 7's 23rd floor was the official emergency command center for the city of New York. And so that's where Giuliani should have gone. That's where all of the federal people should have gone. Everybody should have gone up to that 23rd floor to respond to the apparent plane strikes on 9/11. But everybody got the message that they weren't supposed to, except apparently for a couple of people, including Michael Hess, and Barry Jennings. So Jennings is the only one who has described this in detail. Hess has kept his mouth shut, and perhaps the mysterious death of Jennings has convinced Hess to continue to keep his mouth shut. As I said, Jennings was said to have died right on the date of the release of the NIST report on Building 7.
All
and
true.
When the filmmakers who interviewed him tried to hire a private investigator to investigate the cause of his alleged death, the investigators returned shortly thereafter and returned a large sum of money to the loose change filmmakers and said, "I'm sorry, this is above our pay grade." So obviously some sort of national security or high-level organized crime element was involved in the death or disappearance of Barry Jennings, the eyewitness to these goings-on in Building 7.
Yeah, and again, this will be new to a lot of people listening to this tonight. They will be aghast, mouth open, on the floor. Wow, a man gave testimony, which he did. Everything Kevin Barrett just told you is true. Testified about this massive explosion, but this huge hole in the building. And died exactly in the mysterious circumstances described by Kevin there on the day of the NIST release. Shocking stuff, and most people to this day never heard of Building 7.
He may or may not have died, Richie, just like Jeffrey Epstein, who may or may not have actually died. Because I mean, these people, there are ways of getting rid of them
true.
That may or may not involve death.
But the mafia doesn't take chances either, does it? Why leave a living witness, who might become contrite in his later years? We all know about deathbed confessions, don't we, Kevin, around JFK and other things like that. We know maybe it's best to just get rid of him once and for all. Tell me this, Kevin, was there in storage underneath, in secure storage underneath Building 7, a large amount of gold bullion? Is that true?
That I don't know for sure, and maybe you can send me references to that. There have been reports that one of the issues around 9/11 was a very large amount of very important wealth concentrated in the form of securities and so on, as well as gold bullion. And I think that the one fact that we know for sure is that there was some kind of truck that was caught as the towers came down, and it got squashed, leaving the towers, and had a bunch of gold bullion in it. And we don't know how many other truckloads came out. But that was, I believe, the sub-basements beneath the towers. As for Building 7, I'm not actually aware of gold bullion beneath Building 7, but there are so many aspects to 9/11, I may have just overlooked this.
No, I doubt you overlooked it, Kevin. It might just be rumour. You deal in what you can prove and what you can flesh out. One of the things I'll never forget, and for those who might be listening to this and they might be a bit sceptical, for me, the definitive proof for me, I'm delighted that the University of Alaska Fairbanks and architects and engineers have done this 4-year model. It seems to be scientifically very sound. It's wonderful. I doubt it'll get much coverage in the media. I doubt very many other academics in structural engineering will take a look at it. This is how sickening this bloody world we live in is. But I'll never forget the man who had the lease on the buildings, Larry Silverstein. I mean, if you want definitive proof, Larry Silverstein went, I'm going to paraphrase what he said because I don't have the direct quote, but he said of Building 7, he said, there was so much loss of life that day, we made the decision to pull it. What the bloody hell does that mean? We made the decision to pull it. Well, I've interviewed demolition people in the past. I know you have, Kevin. Pull it means destroy it, demolish it. Now, how could Larry Silverstein, in the afternoon of September the 11th, decide to pull a building? How did he then have time to get a crew in all the chaos to come into Building 7 and rig it up for explosion? The obvious answer is he couldn't have done it. He gave it away, didn't he, Kevin? He gave it away by saying we had to pull it.
That's right, yeah. I think what he said precisely was there'd been so much loss of life that we decided that maybe the best thing to do, he said I was talking to the fire department commander, and we decided that there'd been so much loss of life that maybe the best thing to do was pull it. And so we made that decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse.
Well said, Kevin. So, that's what he said, word for word.
In context, we made the decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse. After 5 years, Silverstein's PR guys finally tried to put out an excuse for that quote, and they said, well, he was talking about pulling out the fire crews from the building.
Yeah.
There hadn't ever been any fire crews in the building, and we made that decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse. That means that they made the decision and then did it, and it collapsed. The fire crews cannot possibly explain that quote.
Did Silverstein have foreknowledge of what was going to happen? He signed a 99-year plus lease on the buildings, and he took great care to take out an insurance policy. I'm just remembering things you've told me over the years, Kevin. I'm not kissing your backside now, but these are the things you've told me over the years. I've got a long memory, so if I get any of this wrong, remind me. But didn't Silverstein go to great lengths to make sure that, obviously taking out a lease on the buildings, he needed to have insurance? Didn't he go to great lengths to make sure that the insurance covered planes flying into the buildings and building collapses or something like that?
Yes, he purchased the entire World Trade Center on a 99-year lease in July 2001. He already owned Building 7. And interestingly, more than a year ahead of the demolition of Building 7, he had already convened a whole committee and drawn up plans for the new Building 7 that has since replaced the old one. So they apparently knew that it was coming down, but there were no on-the-record plans for getting rid of the old Building 7. Obviously, there was foreknowledge there. Anyway, in July 2001, Silverstein put out a bid on the World Trade Center. It wasn't the low bid, but he still got it anyway from his friends Frank Lowy and what was the name of the guy who was the head of the New York City Port Authority, a third Zionist billionaire. And so they handed Silverstein this sweetheart deal on a low bid, and Silverstein proceeded to double the insurance. There was already insurance on the Trade Center complex, and Silverstein doubled it from what it had been. And according to reports at the time that are cited in David Ray Griffin's New Pearl Harbor and well documented with academic-style footnotes, he hardballed his insurers into changing the policy to cash payout. So having doubled the insurance on the World Trade Center complex, which was a asbestos-riddled white elephant building that the city had been desperate to tear down for over a decade, or buildings, the two towers, Silverstein got lucky on 9/11. He should have been in the Windows to the World restaurant on the top of the North Tower, as he was every other day. But that day, he tells us that he just happened to be reminded by his wife of an appointment with his dermatologist. So both he and his daughter, who had a different ridiculous excuse, failed to show up at the top of the North Tower and failed to die, like everybody else did who did show up that day. So Lucky Larry then emerges unscathed from 9/11, with this huge insurance policy about to hand him cash payout. And what does he do? He has the chutzpah, which is a Yiddish word for unmitigated criminal audacity, to go to court claiming double indemnity.
He did,
on the basis of two separate unrelated terrorist attacks, that is the two airplanes. And he got it, and he walked off with $5 billion in cash on these buildings.
Did Silverstein give any money to the families of those who died in the buildings? I think he did he? I think he was pretty generous.
You know, I'm not aware of that, but clearly there was a hush money plan to give the various victim survivors up to a few $1 million each if they signed away their right to go to court against the real perpetrators of the atrocity. And almost everybody took the money. Very few didn't, and one of them was Ellen Mariani, who repeatedly tried to sue Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, and so on for murdering her husband, who died in one of the planes that day. And her lawsuit ended up getting quashed by Judge Alvin Hellerstein, who oversaw almost all 9/11 related litigation and basically made sure that it all just went away and never got to court, and there was never any discovery or anything else. So yeah, there was lots and lots and lots of money to quote unquote compensate survivors, but what that was really about was making sure that none of them would pursue any legal processes that could get at the truth.
Loads of comments on this, massive amounts of comments on Twitter. Phil Restino is emailing me as well. Phil's got a stake in this, hugely interested in it. Peace activist in Florida, former guest on this program. apparently Jason Bermas, who was on this program, I know you know all about Jason, Kevin. Jason was on with me a few weeks ago. Jason is talking to Phil about an upcoming documentary that James Corbett is going to release, which is solely about Barry Jennings. That'll be very interesting, that. I'll be hugely interested in seeing that. I don't know if you're aware of that, Phil is asking, but that'll be good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, go Jason. We need more investigative reports on this stuff. And, there's a website, I think it's still out there, Jennings Mystery, I believe it's called, jenningsmystery.com, that goes into this case. And that needs to be better known. We need to find out what really happened to Barry Jennings.
Phil has also mentioned somebody you know quite well, Dr. Bob Bowman, who's a former combat fighter pilot and NORAD interceptor pilot, who came clean. Well, didn't come clean. He had nothing to come clean about, but had the courage, apparently, Kevin, to talk about the delayed response on the day, the flights, the incapability or the capabilities of the pilots to fly those planes. Bob Bowman deserves a mention.
Bob Bowman was a real American hero. He may be the greatest American military hero since Smedley Butler. He was the head of SDI, or the Star Wars program under Presidents Ford and Carter. He's a rocket science PhD from Caltech, and he flew over 100 combat missions in Vietnam. And he really should have been president. He was a very brilliant man of great integrity. And he quit his job running the Star Wars program because it was about offense, not defense. We were told that they were going to shoot down Russian nuclear missiles before they hit America. No. What that was really all about was a American first strike. And he couldn't handle that ethically, so he resigned and blew the whistle on that. And then later, when 9/11 happened, he said on September 11, 2001 itself, he already knew that it was a false flag operation, because his experience as a fighter pilot was such that he realized that every time a commercial plane goes significantly off course, it will quickly trigger a U.S. air defense system, which will send up an F-16 or other fighter jet, which will usually arrive beside the plane that's off course within 10 minutes or less, and rock its wings and lead it back on course. And this happens typically 100 times plus per year. But on 9/11, we're told that for almost 2 hours, there were supposedly hijacked planes flying wildly off course all over the eastern seaboard, all over the most protected airspace in the world, with no response whatsoever from fighter jets. So that was how Bob Bowman figured out on the very day that there was something very, very, very wrong. And he was a great 9/11 truth activist and educator, and he ran for Congress in, I believe it was 2008, either 6 or 8, and he won, at least by the honest polls counting the votes outside the voting booths, but due to crooked voting machines, he was deprived of his victory. And he said he would never run for election again as long as there were these black box voting machines. He was a great man, and he's another American hero we need to remember. Just like Barry Jennings, there are these people that could disappear into the memory hole if we don't keep their memories alive. And Bob Bowman is certainly, he should be at the front page of American history textbooks of great American heroes.
Brilliantly said, Kevin. I wouldn't know anything about Bob if it wasn't for you. It was you who told me about Bob Bowman. And our listeners should know all about him. And you should know all about him because it's very important to share with people who are maybe skeptical, to share with them the thoughts of people like Bob because of his credibility, because of what he had done in his life, former director of the Star Wars program. This guy is serious. And, and your skeptical friends and neighbours, they can't so readily or easily ignore guys like Dr. Bob Bowman. Thanks to Phil in Florida for the email there, throwing that out there. It's hugely important there. Dr. Kevin Barrett is our guest. And Kevin has been, well, he was for many years and is at the forefront of educating people about what really happened. And to be fair to Kevin, he's still looking into it. New information from time to time comes to light about this atrocity, which was undoubtedly a false flag attack. It wasn't 19 hijackers armed with box cutters taking over planes and flying them into the Pentagon and the World Trade Center towers and coming down in Maryland. This is a nonsense. And you've only got to look at the comments made by Thomas Keane, who was charged with investigating this and given $3 million, outrageously considering Bill Clinton's impeachment investigation was given $50 million. This is an outrage, but this is what happened. And in his book about the whole process, Keane said that it was set up to fail. People stonewalled him. They wouldn't talk to him. They obfuscated. They blocked him. They ignored him. He didn't feel that people were telling him the truth. This is the guy who was charged with investigating it. Thousands of Americans died that day. And the vast majority of people in the United States are completely unaware that Building 7 existed. And Kevin Barrett is on with me today to talk about it, because Alaska Fairbanks University, along with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, have just published a draft report of a 4-year computer modelling study of the collapse of Building 7. And they have said fire couldn't have done it, but the near-simultaneous failure of every column in the building. That's why it collapsed. Kevin, you're an old hand. You've been around for years. You're a smart man. But we're not going to see this on CNN, on C-SPAN or NBC any day soon, are we?
No, that's one of the really shocking things about this. I already realized that there were problems with the way the American mainstream media handled these kinds of cases based on my study of the JFK assassination, which began while I was still in high school in the 1970s when I saw Mark Lane presenting the Zapruder film in a presentation. And that case certainly affected my life and made me more skeptical of what the U.S. government tells us about things like this. But even I didn't realize that the media was this corrupt, and then the academy as well. But the media, first of all, the New York Times must know who Larry Silverstein is, just like it had to know who Jeffrey Epstein was and what he was doing. Everybody in New York knew about this for almost 20 years. And likewise, Larry Silverstein was the subject of a lawsuit in the mid-1990s that detailed his connections as an organized crime figure, dealing heroin, pimping girls. Silverstein was publicly known as the guy who supplied the nude dancers to all the sleaziest nightclubs in the New York area, but he was also, of course, supplying prostitutes and so on. So he's an organized crime figure, and yet there's no reporting on this whatsoever in the New York Times. And likewise, of course, his connection with Building 7, where he confessed to demolishing his own building, later walked away with $750 million on a false pretext claiming Al-Qaeda did it. This guy has never been exposed or even investigated in the New York media. The New York Times has the most resources of any investigative journalist outlet in America, if not the world, and this is all happening right under their noses. There's something really wrong with the media, but it took me a few years after 9/11 to wake up to that. Even I couldn't believe it was that bad. But once David Ray Griffin's book, The New Pearl Harbor, was in the pipeline, I decided to sit down and take a second look at 9/11. And I was so shocked at what I saw. And the most shocking thing was the failure of the media, which had reported all sorts of information that totally blew the official story out of the water. But it was always one-off. It was never reported in context and honestly as the kind of scandal that all of these things were. So there were literally hundreds of items reported in the mainstream media that destroyed the official story, but they were reported in deceptive ways and then they were never followed up on. And so, our media is totally controlled. There are two problems. One is that the intelligence services have their hooks in the media through things like Operation Mockingbird, the CIA control program for American media. And then secondly, through the fact that most of the U.S. media is in the hands of very wealthy Americans of Jewish ethnicity, which is not a problem, but of loyalty to the state of Israel in various degrees, which is a problem. And these people psychologically, of course, are afraid of terrible things happening to the Jews. They've been taught that throughout history, everybody has been witch hunting Jews, pogroms, Holocausts, and so on. And so even a well-intentioned, liberal, not particularly tribal or Zionist media magnate in the United States would think twice before allowing their media outlet to report on those aspects of 9/11, suggesting that it was primarily done by and for the extremist Likudnik element of the state of Israel. And so the media, for both of these reasons, the fact that it's dominated by people who have some degree of loyalty to Israel and that particular mentality that accompanies it, and then secondly, the intelligence connections and the way the national security state has penetrated the media, it's become just a mockingbird organ of propaganda that will never seek out or report on the truth in cases like 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see these people as Jews. I know they are, or they say they are, Kevin, but they're not religious. They're not religious. They don't believe in God. They don't understand compassion, empathy. They use Jewishness. I mean, the fact that Jews were scapegoated throughout history, the fact that Jews were murdered in Nazi Germany is a wonderful front for these people. And they've used that, I think, very successfully over the years. They're not Jewish. They couldn't give a damn about Jews or the plight of Jews or anybody else for that matter. That's that's always been my opinion. I've stated that very clearly, and their influence is incredible, not just here but in the United States. Paul Craig Roberts has written about it, and anybody who talks about it is labelled as a hate speech monger or a racist, which is laughable. Or prejudiced against Jewish people, which is even more laughable because there isn't anybody. I've never interviewed anybody. I don't know. I've had one or two lunatics over the years. I had a guy on once who said the Jews have an evil gene. I remember laughing at the Jews collectively sit around, they have an evil gene. I laughed at him, but I don't encounter people like that. Yes, the media. You talk about the media and the Zionist control of it. I'll tell you what shocked me. I mean, you corrected me earlier on. You talked about how you hadn't even introduced this into your teaching, and they lied about it and said that you were going around telling people this and that. I'll never forget watching Jeremy Glick on Fox News with Bill O'Reilly. I saw that live as an insomniac. I was up through the small hours of the morning watching Fox News, and I saw this young man, Jeremy Glick, whose father was a Port Authority worker, and all that Jeremy wanted to do was talk about why we shouldn't brutalise people in Afghanistan just because of what happened on September the 11th. My father wouldn't have wanted that. He wouldn't have wanted war. And Fox News got it into their heads that Glick was somehow challenging the narrative of September the 11th. And you remember this, Kevin. Bill O'Reilly brought him on and eviscerated him and threatened him. And that really was a watershed moment for me in terms of how the media works and how the media acts. It wasn't just that the media were ignoring, as you said, their own evidence, their own reporting on 9/11. That's bad enough. But they were going on the attack, trying to destroy people. Is that one of the very earliest examples in recent history of the media doing that? Going after people to destroy them. I know we had McCarthyism and all of that, but in recent times, that's a glaring example of the media not just ignoring the truth, but actively working to prevent people from ever hearing it, Kevin.
Well, I think they've done it before. There are cases like, I think it was Jim Garrison, the district attorney in Louisiana, who was trying to prosecute the actual authors of the JFK assassination. And he became the target of a media smear campaign that was every bit as vicious as what has emerged following September 11th. But I do think Fox News specializes in these kinds of smears. Yeah. Fox News is under the influence of the extremist neoconservative Likudnik wing of Zionism. And when I was talking about Jewish Americans before, Richie, I didn't just mean, sure, there's some psychopathic gangster types, but I think there are good-hearted and decent Jewish Americans who have, because of their conditioning and partly because of reality, are afraid of what might happen if Israel were blamed for 9/11. If it came out that Israel did it, that would be catastrophic in many ways, not only for the state of Israel, but it would be very hard for Jewish people in the U.S. and Europe as well. And good-hearted, decent, intelligent Jewish people, the kind of people that I'm friends with, I understand why they're afraid of this.
Because you believe, Kevin, sorry to interrupt you, because you believe, now, I don't know this to be true. You believe that Israel played a big part in it because of a strategic advantage it wanted in the Middle East, because it wanted to engage the United States in multiple theatre conflicts in the Middle East. That from talking to you over the years, that is why you conclude Israel played a very big part in it. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. And it wasn't just those wars that were on the front burner, the 7 countries in 5 years that 9/11 was designed to take out, according to General Wesley Clark, who got the memo from the neocons right after 9/11 that that's what it was all about. But it was a long-term plan to turn the U.S. and the West against the Islamic world in a broad-based way. So there would be a 100 years war against the Islamic world. And that's because the Islamic world is the place where resistance to the genocidal colonization and occupation of Palestine is strongest. Palestine has been Islamic administered Holy Land virtually ever since Islam existed. And so the only way that this genocidal settler colony occupying Palestine can look towards a future lasting more than a decade or two is to create this long-term U.S. Western war against the Islamic world through control of public opinion.
Let me argue with you. I'm going to argue. You and I have had this out before. I don't know that you're wrong, and I don't know that you're right. The United States had plenty of reasons to initiate the false flag in New York on September 11th itself. Its own deep state, its own intelligence agencies had enough good reasons to do it without Israel being involved. I'm not saying you're wrong. Here's the thing that pisses me off. Not about you, Kevin, but it's always pissed me off. Arabs don't give a damn about the plight of the Palestinians. You know, I've spent years reading about the rise of neoconservatism and the rise of militant Islam. You know, Saeed Qutb and all that stuff, Adam Curtis's documentary. I've read all the books. And Saeed Qutb and his ilk, they didn't give a damn about Palestine. They didn't give a damn about the plight of the indigenous, righteous Palestinian people, whose land it belongs to, by the way. Israel has no right to be there, I've always said that. But the Arabs don't care about them. So that kind of throws a little shed of doubt for me anyway, not for you, but for me, that Israel planned or had any part in 9/11. Israel doesn't need to worry about the Islamic world taking Israel on over Palestine, because I believe the Islamic world doesn't care. Go ahead.
Well, you may be right that some of the leaders in Islamic countries are sold out and not doing what they can to try to defend the Palestinian people. But public opinion in the Arab and Islamic worlds is overwhelmingly behind the Palestinians, as every poll shows. You know, I watch Al Jazeera, among other Arabic news stations, partly to keep up my Arabic. And to this day, you can't ever hear the word Israel on the vast majority of these outlets.
No way.
It's always El-Kahin Sioni, the Zionist entity, because there would be outrage among the Arab viewing public if people said the word Israel and implied that the country is a legitimate nation rather than an occupying entity. So public opinion in the Arab and Islamic world to this day is very, very, very strongly pro-Palestine and does not accept the legitimacy of the state of Israel. And it's this long-term public opinion thing that was the purpose of 9/11, not so much in the Arab world, of course, but, you know, countries, their policies are partly controlled by public opinion. And by creating this impression of Arabs and Muslims as evil terrorists, and this is the new crusade, as the West has to go after these evil Arab Muslim terrorists in the so-called war on terrorism and fight an eternal war against those people, that idea, that way of framing reality was very much in the long term, as in 100-year plus, strategic interest of Israel.
What do you, very, very final question. Thanks for coming on today at short notice, by the way. I'm so delighted you did, because it's important to talk about this. Look, I'm on the fence about Israel's involvement in 9/11. You make a compelling argument. Nobody could accuse me of being scared of criticism from Zionism. There's been a lot of movement this year to try and destroy this radio program. And Zionists in this country have published my address. They've urged people to come and find me. You've got mentioned, by the way, in some of the articles you have yourself about this program. I'm not scared of anybody. I'll call out...
They can't handle the truth, Richie.
Well, do you know what it is? I'll call out people, no matter where they are, for what I believe them to, you know, when they're wrong. And I hate Israel. I hate the state of Israel in terms of the government, not the people, of course. What it's done historically, it doesn't have any right to exist. It is a rotten, apartheid, brutal occupying state. It is filthy. It behaves like the Nazis. I will say that all day long. I have no fear of that. But I reserve judgment on blaming them for everything. I know you don't, Kev. I know you don't. But there are people in the independent media. If somebody trips over a banana skin, they blame Israel for it. I know you're not that. Let me ask you briefly before we wrap today. Thanks very much. I mentioned Saeed Qutb. What do you make of him and his legacy? What a question to say. Final question. 30 seconds. What do you make of Saeed Qutb?
Well, you know, he was a important figure in the Islamic awakening, which I identify with, but I don't really identify with him and his strain of things. But I think he had a good point that in a world without God, everything is permitted, as Dostoevsky said. And so he wants the Islamic countries to get back to their traditional system of social organization, which it's organized around the religion of Islam. That part I agree with. But as for some of the details, and certainly the kinds of people that he inspired, if you want to trace his work, you know, through to things like ISIS, which is just despicable.
Yeah.
That's a horrific bunch of blood-curdling savages and idiots. Then he certainly was a bad influence. But I think if you actually read his work, you'll find both good and bad in it.
Brilliant, Kevin, and everybody should. Don't just look at the Adam Curtis documentary. Read about the father of neoconservatism. Remind me of his name, Kevin. William Christall studied under him. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Leo Strauss.
Well done, Leo Strauss, another madman. Strauss, a complete lunatic, and the rise of Strauss and the rise of Kutub and these ideas, and it's fascinating stuff. Thanks for your time today. TruthJihad.com. Read Kevin Barrett. Listen to his broadcasts. He is brilliant. He's really terrific, is Kevin. Thanks, mate, for coming back today. Hugely important. I hope that it is a watershed moment for many people. The Alaska and Architects and Engineers report. It's good news anyway, in a world of pretty bad news. Thanks for your time as usual, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Richie. It's always good talking with you.
Brilliant. Kevin Barrett, live on the line to us from his home in Madison, Wisconsin. They're talking about Building 7 and much more besides as well. I'll get to tweets now. Said Kutub, Richie, who? Leo Strauss? Educate yourselves. Leo Strauss is the father of neoconservative thinking. He was worshipped by Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, William Christall Sr., William Christall Jr., all these nutcases, these neocon Zionists behind all of the wars we've been talking about there. You've got to know this stuff, people. You've got to know it. Your tweets and then Meria Heller after this from Joy Division in Manchester. The time is coming up for 6 minutes past the hour. I'm Richie Allen. It's Thursday, the 5th of September 2019, and this is your Richie Allen Show. And there is none like it on planet Earth. Europe's most listened to independent radio show. Live on Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv, TuneIn Radio and richieallen.co.uk. Ian Curtis, this is brilliant. Joy Division, love will tear us apart on the Richie Allen Show. The time is 8.5 minutes past the hour. Thursday's programme, the last live Richie Allen radio show of the week. Thanks for tuning into it. Great to hear Kevin in the first hour. My next guest, again, needs little introduction. Wonderful journalist, brilliant broadcaster, hilariously funny, really is. Check out Meria, meria.net, the oldest podcast on the internet. She's done it all: commercial radio, writing, public speaking, and a really important voice, I think, in the independent media. Always a pleasure to welcome back to our programme, live from Arizona, our great friend Meria Heller. Welcome back, Meria. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back, Richie. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all. Do you watch the Brexit? You've said the word shit on this programme before, so I don't mind swearing in front of a lady. Brexit shit show. Are you watching that over there? What do you...
Yeah, I got to tell you, I've been trying to make sense out of what's happening there. That's why I need you on my show, so you can explain it to us.
Well, it's pretty simple.
It looks like what the military term in the United States is FUBAR.
Yeah, we won't explain FUBAR. We'll let our listeners figure it out if they don't know.
Feel free to Google it.
Absolutely. Ultimately, we're not going to leave. When I mentioned that you were coming on, I like to give a heads up because listeners love hearing from you and they have questions for you. Because I obviously am kind of European, UK-centric a lot of the time in this programme. And listeners said to me, you've got Meria on, have you, Richie? Ask her about the weather in her country and Hurricane Dorian and the seeming kind of indestructibility of this hurricane, which CNN have been reporting, when it seems to be dying out, kind of gathers momentum again. What's going on with that? Devastating the southeast coast, devastating the Caribbean. People think accelerated, is it engineered? And I don't know the answer to that. What do you think?
Well, I got to tell you, I started watching it, and since it's so historic in so many ways, especially the fact that it wasn't moving for so long, when I woke up this morning, I guess I must have, maybe my subconscious was already picking up that question. Because when I woke up this morning, first it went from a 4 to a 5, then it stalled, then it went to a 2, then it didn't really hit Florida. Now this morning it's at a 3. So all I could think of was weather manipulation. And if people don't think that they create and can control and move these hurricanes, they haven't been paying attention. And when I tell people all you need to do is Google the U.S. Patent Office, and you will find no less than 90 patents for weather manipulation, for spraying our skies. It goes on and on. So, right now, I'm feeling like this is either being steered, I think of Katrina and how it deliberately wiped out the poor black neighborhoods that the white people wanted for a long time, let alone the blowing of the levees and everything else I covered during Katrina.
Yeah.
Keeping the help that was sent, food, water, everything out of Louisiana. The people, in charge in Louisiana at the time crying, begging for help. And then you have to always look at who benefited. That's always the answer. Who benefits?
Can we stay with this for a minute, by the way? I just love this woman, folks. This is Meria Heller. Let's stay with Katrina, because you did speak to me many moons ago about this back in my TPV days, in your TPV days, Meria Heller. You talked to me about this. Talk to us about Katrina, which was catastrophic. It made world headlines. New Orleans, devastation. You believe gentrification, that's the posh name for it, gentrification, clearing out land to make it available for wealthy developers. Give us the kind of Cliff Note version of what you think happened around Hurricane Katrina. This is really important. Thanks for bringing it up, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, I covered that every day, and there were days that I was crying. I was crying with the people of Louisiana. And listening to them crying and begging for help, let alone, people that witnessed the levees being blown, black people getting shot in the back while they're trying to escape. And you look at the aftermath, communities that had total black leadership are now total white leadership. Here in America, and I'm not just going to say since Katrina, because this is how my country started, unfortunately. Racism has always been a part of America. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of interviewing Donald Jeffries on his latest book, Crimes and Cover-Up in American History, from, 1776 to 1963. And even though our history has taught us what heroes our founding fathers were, especially Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln was a racist. He was a racist. He was against the Constitution. He did horrific things that were repeated by George W. Bush when he was president. So when you look at the racism and what we are now calling white extinction anxiety and all the shootings and everything else going here, my thought was, Florida is a Trump state. And if there's a way that they can steer this storm away from his voters, I wouldn't be surprised if that happened.
Donald, because you've been making radio programs and investigating events for years and years. You're a grown-up woman and you're very intelligent. You know that a lot of our listeners will just be, what did she just say there? Because they don't know this. You said, let me take you back to Katrina. We were told the levees, the storm was so severe, the swell breached the levees. But you believe, and I remember you telling me about this years ago, and you made a very good case at the time. And I know one thing you've never been is you've never been a bullshitter. Doesn't mean you're right all the time, neither am I. But you're honest. You believe what you say. You believe to this day that the levees were removed to allow that to happen.
And listen, there's plenty of video, unless YouTube strikes their videos like mine. But there was plenty of video of the witnesses saying that levee was blown. And people crying. But interestingly enough, the rich white neighborhoods didn't even lose their power during Katrina. They were heavily protected while the cops were shooting black people in the back for trying to save their lives, let alone the horror that went on in that arena where they had them all stored.
The big dome, the big Superdome in New Orleans, the big futuristic stadium, the indoor stadium.
Well, I think it was a preview of Trump's concentration camps. Here we are in America, it's 2019, and we have concentration camps in our country.
To get
it's
people.
Just a matter of time before they go for the next group of people, because people think, well, it's just happening to the Mexicans, who cares? No, that's the way Hitler did it. You start with your own people, your dissenters, your political dissenters. Goes back to when I interviewed, what was his name, of the Pentagon Papers? But
Daniel Ellsberg, no?
Daniel Ellsberg, there you
Daniel
go.
Ellsberg, yeah.
We had quite the lively discussion on the show, and at the end of the show, he actually said to me, Richie, I guess I'll see you in the camps.
No way.
That's what he said to me. And I said, well, at least I'll be where the intelligent people are.
Because before Alex Jones went mad,
Went mad?
before Alex swallowed the big Trump banana, Alex did some good work over the years, and he did a very good investigative report about FEMA camps and about coffins. Do you remember that? And he had the evidence.
Yeah,
it was
the
true.
Walmarts and all the rest of it. Now Walmarts are just shooting galleries.
Jesus, Maria, I don't know what to say to that. So,
I mean, we have so many shootings in this country, Richie. I can't keep up with them. I can't even differentiate them anymore.
Let's have an argument then. I love you and you love me. Let's be a happy family. Our listeners are not stupid. They know that you and I have known each other for years and we're great mates. So we're not going to pull the wool over their eyes. We are friends, but we're going to have an argument now. Me and the woman Heller are going to have a proper row. I sympathise with people whom I think you might be. Your politics would be very different, who say that the government are coming for our guns, and some of the shooting sprees that spring up are genuine, but they are being steered, for want of a better word. We talked about steering the weather. They are being steered towards, whether it's supermarkets, whether it's highly populated areas, people who might be a little bit unwell, to give the authorities an excuse to disarm people. What say you?
Well, I'm not going to say that that's always the case, and that's been the problem with everybody from Alex Jones to you name it.
Yeah.
Everything's a conspiracy, false flag, none of it happened. I've been telling these people, not Alex because I never talked to him, but I've been telling these people, so-called experts, for years, just because it's a false flag doesn't mean people didn't get killed. And they don't know how to cover their ass, I hate to say it.
Yeah.
And they go right to the extreme. So, here with all these shootings, some of them could be, but, because, I cover every inch of what's going on in this country, let alone the rest of the world. What you look at is, first of all, in my opinion, nobody needs an AR-15 to go duck hunting.
Yeah.
Nobody needs 100 rounds in a gun unless they're going to kill people. Let's face it. What else are you going to do with that? Bambi doesn't take that many, and I'm totally against hunting, by the way.
Me too.
But when you look at some of these things, what I find is when these people from the MAGA Obama to you name it go to court, they're using Donald Trump as their reason for what they did. They're actually naming him in court. I'm just doing what my president told me to do. So, to me, it's about, what is the goal here? Is the goal, to totally destroy America from the inside, which I covered, 15 years ago when I was covering the American Union. But listen, Americans are crazy. You got to look at the American population. Right now, they said something like, I don't remember the percent, but I have it saved for my news show right after this. But a lot of people in the military now are obese. Okay. Well, when you look at the American diet, you couple it with all their pharmaceutical drugs, you couple it with the plastics in our lungs, the plastics in our water, our sky, the poisons in the chemtrails, the bacteria, and working 3 jobs to make the same money they made in 1970, they're crazy. Okay. Everybody's on their last nerve. So do I find it odd when we have a president who basically has given permission for all the crazy people in this country to just come out and do what they want? Whether it's, some grown man who decides to take a 12-year-old kid and slam him to the floor because he didn't take his hat off while the salute to the flag was going on. This country has been founded by insanity, and the insanity has now been let loose.
The rage is genuine. I can see it. I can see it here as well. It's not just in the United States. It's genuine, and it is part of an overarching agenda. I really do believe that. Let me stay with the guns for a minute. Meria Heller is our guest. I can't recommend her show highly enough. Meria.net, Meria.net. Go and find her online, and don't be triggered if Meria says things that you don't agree with. Tough shit, Paddy. We don't always agree.
You don't have to agree.
Exactly.
All you have to do is think.
Listen.
And do some
exactly.
research.
Listen to a different point of view. Now, you mentioned AR-51s. I think I don't know very much about guns.
AR-15s.
AR-15s. Now, I came across on American television recently some gun enthusiasts, and they seem like very decent men. and they said, look, we like these assault weapons. We're collectors, and we use them. We've got these target ranges. That's what we use them for. We don't use them for hunting. They would agree with you that it's ridiculous to take a weapon like that into the woods to try and shoot a bear or a squirrel, God forgive me, or even a deer. They said, look, and they did say this. I wish I'd gotten the clip, but I couldn't get the clip so I could play it on the show. They said, why should we be told by our government, and these guys were not Donald Trump supporters, by the way. They said, why should we be told that we should not be allowed to own these, yes, very serious, very powerful semi-automatic weapons, while at the same time our police force is transforming in front of our eyes. And whereas a policeman and a policewoman used to have the old revolver on their waist and their baton and maybe a taser, now the police look like something from Paul Verhoeven's RoboCop movie. They're walking up and down our streets looking like the military. Now, I think they make a brilliant point, Meria. What say you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you got to say, how many cops have done a mass shooting?
But aren't the cops? But aren't the cops killing innocent people morning, noon, and night?
Back in the day, everybody uses the Second Amendment, which it would be wonderful if everybody actually read the whole thing. But everybody uses the Second Amendment as their reason. But remember, back when the Constitution was written, people had a musket that took like 10 minutes just to stuff one bullet in.
Right, yeah.
Okay, they didn't make the Second Amendment with the kind of weapons that are available now that we sell to people all over the world. Let's not forget that's America's #1 export is death. But all these mass shootings have one thing in common. They all used an AR-15. Now, nobody's saying take those guns away. What they're saying is we should at least have background checks. And 60% or more of Americans want background checks, which I don't think is unreasonable. And what people don't realize is as soon as Trump got into office, he reversed Obama's rule that said mentally ill people could not get guns.
Did he do that now? Are you being absolutely fair there? Give us the absolute letter of the detail there. Did he reverse, did Trump make it possible for people with psychiatric illness history to get guns?
That's probably the only way he can get a gun. So you look at that, and you look at him, we're going to change, we're going to do national background checks, and he gets one phone call from Wayne LaPierre, who never made it in the Army because he had mental problems. One phone call from the NRA, and he reversed his decision. Today, California, the first state in the country, has labeled the NRA as a terrorist organization.
Is that right? No, see, thank God for you coming on today, because that is major news. The state of California has basically, in the UK we would say prescribed. If they've labelled the NRA as a terrorist organisation, presumably the next step is that Californians are breaking the law if they become members of the NRA. Is that how it works?
I really don't know. I would think that if they're a terrorist organization, the first thing that should happen is that they should lose their tax exemption. Okay, remember the NRA doesn't pay taxes either. Nobody seems to pay taxes in this country except working folk like myself. Yeah. And I resent paying my taxes. Believe me, I resent it so much my accountant probably can't stand looking at me anymore. But every time I go in to pay my quarterlies, I say to her, I'm paying more taxes than the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And I resent it.
Proportionally,
and remember, we have
right.
a president who said, as soon as I get in office, I'm going to release my tax returns. And now he's suing not to release
Not to do it. By the way, San Francisco, you'll never get any lies from Meria Heller. San Francisco, as Meria just told us, has declared the National Rifle Association, which is a lobby group, which operates and lobbies on behalf of gun owners and gun salesmen and saleswomen. It's labelled the NRA a domestic terrorist. That's pretty crazy. That's the San Francisco board, basically. And the governor and the mayor and the whole lot. That's pretty big, that.
Well, listen, they have blood on their hands no matter how they look at it. And what's interesting is after the mass shooting in El Paso, which of course was followed by the mass shooting in Odessa, what did the NRA do? Wayne LaPierre took, $6 million to buy himself a house. The woman beneath him in the organization upped their security. Okay, they upped their own personal security because they know that now they're making themselves targets. listen, eventually the snake eats its own tail. That's just history. That's the way it works.
Yeah, it's the way it's always been. Can I read a few comments, my friend? It's
Sure.
Meria, meria.net. Some good comments coming in. Faisal says if the government was really democratic and could be trusted, I'd be all for more gun controls. However, I don't agree with disarming law-abiding citizens while arms companies are not controlled from selling or exporting illegally. I think Maria would agree with all of that.
Absolutely agree. Listen, I own a weapon, and I know how to use it. It's not an AR-15. I never felt the need, believe it or not, in all the years of growing up in New York City to have a gun. But when I came out to Arizona, which is like the Wild West, and was accosted a few times, I knew I needed something to protect myself. But I did it the right way. I went for training. They did the background check. I took classes. I didn't need an AR-15. I needed something to protect myself, which anybody can do. A 6-shooter, that's going to do it. And think about it. If all these mass shooters only had a 6-shooter, they can only kill 6 people at a time instead of 100 every 2 minutes. So when you have an unbalanced population, and unfortunately a very ignorant population, there has to be some kind of law in place. Listen, we've heard they're coming for your guns. I've heard that all my life. Okay. I would say if anybody's going to take your guns, it's going to be this administration.
This administration. Phil in Florida, who I mentioned earlier, says Katrina was as bad as Meria is telling it. And he sent me a clip from Dane Wigington of geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane's been on with me. I know you know Dane. Meria,
absolutely.
You know Dane very well. And Phil is endorsing what Meria said about Hurricane Katrina. There are a couple of dissenting comments. Let's read them out. Fran says, Richie, it was possible last weekend to work our hurricane trajectory and strength weakening at various points using European Met models. Geoengineering, no, not in this instance. So Fran is saying that the Hurricane Dorian, Fran doesn't believe that geoengineering is behind it. That's Fran's opinion. I appreciate that, Fran. Thanks very much for that. A lot of people talking about that hurricane.
Well, I haven't seen Dutch Sense video on it yet because he's the best there is at looking at anomalies in these kind of storms. I'm sure you're familiar with Dutch Sense and his work.
I am, yeah, only through you, to be honest, only through your program, it must be said.
Oh, okay. But, if there are anomalies, listen, it takes a couple of days for people to look at it. Look how long it took for everybody to realize that 9/11 was a bill of goods sold to us. It takes time because you got to wait and you have to do the homework and then you have to say, who benefited. That's always the answer, the question everybody should ask about everything. So it's really, listen, it's too soon to tell. But when I woke up this morning and I saw how this thing keeps flip-flopping, I said, yeah, something's abnormal here.
It's very abnormal. Look, I've obviously been watching the news for most of my adult life, and I know a little bit about hurricanes. One of my favourite books of all time is a book by Sebastian Junger, a book called The Perfect Storm, which is made into a film. And I learned an awful lot about storm fronts and weather systems at sea from reading it several times. In fact, I visited the pub where it's set in Boston, in Gloucester, in Massachusetts. I actually visited the pub many years ago and talked to people there about weather and fishermen and the dangers of it. This storm is crazy. It doesn't mean it's not.
We have 3 more forming right behind this. So it'll be interesting. Like a couple months ago when they said this was going to be a very severe hurricane season, I go back to thinking about the interview I did with Scott Stevens, the weatherman, who was a real weatherman on TV until he started covering chemtrails and weather manipulation and lost his job. And when I got him on my show, he said something very interesting. He says, we can no longer predict the weather until we know who's making it.
No way. So Scott worked for local television, local news as a meteorologist, and then he had the stupidity. I'm not taking the piss out of Scott. I'm not mocking him, but he had the temerity to talk about geoengineering, and then he was fired, Meria. Just fired.
Exactly. That's what happens here in America. You
Lovely.
get fired.
Oh my God.
One of my friends said, this was so funny because he doesn't live a stone's throw away from where I live. And he said, Donald Trump's made sure to stop all the chemtrails. And I looked at him and I said, look up. and the sky was filled with chemtrails.
Tic-tac-toe in the sky above your head, yeah.
Right. So what's interesting is people just will believe any meme, anything. They'll believe anything except their own eyes, ears, nose, and throat at this point.
Listen, I have it here all the time.
Like, do you have skin on your body? You know, I went into one of the local shops yesterday, and where I live, you have to understand, I'm not in Phoenix, okay? I live at 5,000 feet above sea level. It's the mountains, okay? We get all 4 seasons here. And yet, when I went into the store yesterday, myself and the woman behind the counter were complaining that we're still in the 90s here. I said, it's September, and I still have my air conditioning on.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand, 15 years ago when I moved here, I would use my air conditioning 2 weeks out of the summer. The past 3-4 years, I put it on in April, and it doesn't end till October. So all you need is skin on your body to know the weather is changing.
Brilliant. Okay. And while it's changing, you've got the Thunberg cult telling us that it's man's industrial activity and man's creation of carbon. Now, we are a dirty bunch of bastards. You talked earlier on about the pollution, the plastic. Of course we are. But I don't believe that man's industrial activity is changing the weather. But they're changing the weather. In fact, the first person to get me to think about that was Dane Wigington. I had a good heated discussion with Dane a few years ago. And I didn't understand Dane because I wasn't listening to him as well as I should have been listening to him. And he went, we are seeing drastic climate changes, but it's because of the manipulation. It's because of what's going on. But they're blaming this stuff on man to deindustrialize the world and plunge us into poverty. Look, that's just my bloody opinion. What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's twofold. Okay, actually, it's threefold. You know, there's climate change, there's weather, and then you have the earth changes. You know, nobody wants to talk about the earth changes. I don't know, you know, where you're at, Richie, but many years ago, I want to say maybe 25 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, everybody in the so-called New Age community were talking about the earth changes. You know, when Earth goes through her natural cycles and how utopic everything was going to be. And how they were looking forward to it. Some people were getting rich making maps on safe places to live during the earth changes. Wow. And you know, if we take in David Icke's work, you know, everything comes from the sun. You know, what's happening out there is affecting us here.
Yeah.
So that's another part of it. Then you've got man's filthy contribution. Man may be changing the weather somewhat, but the truth of the matter is, we have polluted our own web of life for human beings to stay and not be extinct, which some scientists have said the human race will be extinct by 2031. Some are saying 2050. My opinion, I'm like, wow, these guys are pretty optimistic. But, you know, we can't live without clean air, clean food, and clean water.
Absolutely right. And it's being poisoned deliberately, the land, to pave the way for Satan, isn't it? The earth is being destroyed. Not just for, that's not the only bloody reason. There's other reasons. Depopulate areas, maybe like in New Orleans, as you described earlier on. But Satan wants to make the earth infertile. It's not the only biotech company that wants to do that. But they want to do that so that their frankenseeds will become the only means by which we can grow food. Or am I wearing a tinfoil hat there?
Right. Well, you know, here, because I know you're in the UK, so you might not be familiar. But if you go to a plant nursery here and you want to buy a potted plant, and you want to plant it in your garden, most of them are Monsanto plants, and they all have restrictions on the fact that you cannot cut and clip and replant that plant. In other words, back in the day, you could take clippings off a plant and make another one. Now you can't.
Because you're infringing on their patent. What? Oh, sorry, Meria, because you're infringing on their patent.
Exactly.
Bastards.
And, their patent is to make their plants can grow in heavy aluminum. Well, what's the number one thing they're spraying on the soil in this country but aluminum? So they're making aluminum resistant plants. Think about that when you're eating genetically modified food.
Loads of comments.
To me, if humans can't mutate, and I think very few people are going to be able to mutate to the amount of poison and pollution on this planet, you're not going to survive. And then again, why would you want to survive in a world like that?
Why would you want to live in a scorched earth? Yeah. Patricia, our friend, tweets the Business Insider newspaper, and she sends us a quote from the Business Insider. It says, President Donald Trump has frequently blamed the mental illness problem for mass shootings, but made it easier for people with certain mental illnesses to buy guns. The Business Insider. Thanks, Patricia, endorsing what you said earlier on. Great friend of ours, Jean-Anne Crowley in Cleggan in the west of Ireland, listening to this with great interest. What does Meria think about the wildfires in California? Direct energy weapons and that sort of technology. A lot of people think those fires are unnatural. Again, that there might be another agenda behind them. What do you think of all those fires? We talked about this.
When you looked at some of those places in California, it absolutely looked like directed energy weapons, just like the Ground Zero in New York after 9/11. There's no way that official story was true. And yet, when you look at California, listen, this is the way America works. The big corporations can set your whole place on fire, and you're going to pay to repair what they didn't have right in the first place. And then you're going to pay double for your electricity after that. It always falls on the consumer. Always. Just like Trump's tariffs. All they are taxes. More taxes on us. Because people put a failed businessman who couldn't even keep a casino going as president. And, this man is mentally deranged. Many psychiatrists in this country have said that he is sundowning. His Alzheimer's out of control. He needs to go for a full examination. But then they get these, lying doctors who are criminals in themselves to say, yeah, everything's fine. He makes Ronald Reagan look like he's a Mensa student. And everybody knew Reagan was senile.
Yeah, but all he had to do was read an autocue, and all that Trump needs to do is read an autocue too, right? Basically.
I don't know. It's just crazy. And I mean, then he goes and puts an entire state in the union in a state of panic by saying Alabama was in the direction of the Hurricane Dorian. And then he just takes a Sharpie and changes the map, which is against the law to change a federal weather map. So he, worse than George W. Bush, who was known for the fact that he would never apologize or take responsibility for anything. Trump is even worse because his ego gets out there and his narcissism, and he has to make a bad situation worse to try to prove himself right.
Yeah. And the thing is, however bad he is, and I think I think Trump has a lot to answer for with respect to his behaviour, sexual proclivities, Jeffrey Epstein, which we'll talk about in a minute with your permission for the last few minutes of the programme. We'll talk a little bit about Epstein and what's going on, what might come out when transcripts are looked at, when statements are taken, when files are opened. We'll talk about that in a minute.
They said there's 1,000 people in that paperwork, and they have over 1 million documents.
1,000 well-known, connected people from every walk of life. We'll talk about that in a second. But to me, Trump is just behaving naturally, as bad as he is. I think that's why Trump was chosen. Trump was meant to give us the greatest reality TV show that we've ever seen. And it feels real to him. Reality. Oh yeah, it's mad. It's crazy. But it probably feels real to him. It feels genuine to him. And maybe he's not aware of, the puppet that he is. I know it doesn't make it any easier for those who have to live with him and the fallout from this madness, but he's ultimately not responsible for any of it. In my opinion, he's just a puppet, however bad and dreadful and rotten a human being he might be, which brings us around neatly to Jeffrey Epstein and thousands of people who might be named in documents that might be unsealed. I'm not going to get that excited, Meria, because I've been around too long. I believe that we're not going to see the unearthing of all the various people that went to these islands, that went on the plane. that were part of the horrific trafficking and abuse of children, the very many famous people that I have no doubt are implicated. I'm not so sure that they're going to be outed. What do you think? Give us a flavour of what's going on.
I think they'll out a few. You know, the judge already dismissed the case here in the United States. That case has already been dismissed. They did allow some of his victims to testify in court, to just let them feel good, but the case has been dismissed. It's been dropped against Epstein. So now it's a matter of, cover up William Barr. Will he allow any investigation to proceed, since his father was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein, his father who wrote a very pornographic book that included a lot of sex trafficking and the same kind of stories that happened on Orgy Island while he was a professor, didn't even use a fake name. So these people are all connected. And when, Americans need to realize, I don't care which side of the fence they are, whether it's Clinton, whether it's Trump, either party, your movie stars, the people that tell you what to do in the news, these people are all connected. They're all making big fat salaries to dictate to the rest of us what we are going to believe. And that's why it's important to do your own homework. For 20 years, I've been telling my listenership, I do the homework so you don't have to. Okay. And they trust me because, listen, I just have really good studying skills. Okay. For whatever reason, I was born this way. And I'm constantly reading books. I'm constantly watching them. Even when I watch these ridiculous debates going on, I'm not so much concerned about what they're saying. I'm watching their body language because people's body language tells me everything I need to know about them.
Yeah. Listen,
but it's a sad state because we've been led around by our nose for so long in this country that we can't tell the truth anymore about what's real and what's not. And people have gotten either too tired, too lazy to do any research on their own.
Well, you talked earlier on now. Hang on. You did say earlier on, and you were right to say earlier on, it is the hardship of life. That is what prevents people from engaging with any of this because they don't have any time. It's rotten.
And that's why they keep the poor down. That's why they keep us, struggling to pay our bills. Look, I struggle to pay my bills just like everybody else. So if anybody's under the illusion that I'm being funded by anybody, that's an illusion. Okay, this is something I chose to do 20 years ago because of necessity. Somebody has to do this.
Absolutely right. And you did say something. You did yourself a disservice. You said, I do the research so the audience doesn't have to. You were doing a disservice to yourself there because you always encourage your listeners. I know this because I listen. You always tell them, listen, take that bit of information and cross-reference it yourself. That's what you always do. You're not. You're
absolutely. But I know nobody wants to suffer.
They don't want to do it.
Yeah. So I'll sit there with my notepad and watch the whole debate.
Hey, listen, on Epstein,
my opinion on it,
and your opinion on Epstein's. Then you don't believe that the judge will unseal the depositions that Epstein gave. You think those will remain mysterious?
I think that we will get some information. But it'll protect the people it needs to protect. Listen, everybody right away, Hillary Clinton had him killed. First of all, Hillary Clinton doesn't have the access Donald Trump has, or William Barr, Trump's personal attorney, posing as Attorney General of the United States. And now he's the one investigating the supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. That's like the cops investigating themselves after they've killed an innocent person.
Imagine that. Imagine the cameras weren't working outside his cell. Who'd have believed it, eh? What a coincidence.
Right. But, years ago, Roger Stone pitched me with his book on the Clintons. And, listen, I'm an equal opportunity cover all the criminals. So I had Roger on my show back then when he came out with his book on the Clintons. And listen, I was not easy on the Clintons during his years in office either. But at one point, we did talk about Orgy Island. And he did admit that Trump indeed went there, but he did not partake. Now, that's as stupid as Bill Clinton saying, I smoked pot, but I didn't inhale.
I was there,
right.
But I didn't get involved. I just had a few drinks and just let people get on with it. Yeah.
And let's not forget Jeffrey Epstein. One of his claims to fame was that he introduced Melania to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Donald Trump...
plenty of pictures of them all partying together.
Donald Trump partook in Epstein's activities. I am as sure of that as I am sure of the day I was born. Why?
Absolutely.
Because of where Donald Trump is now. It's as simple as that. Every one of them, past, present, future, will be compromised in some way. Otherwise, they will never ascend to an office as laudable as the Oval Office or number 10 Downing Street. They've all got skeletons. Doesn't have to be children.
Exactly.
Doesn't have to be children.
It reminds me of the shows I did on Skull and Bones.
Yeah.
And how they have to perform, naked and lay naked in a coffin and share their filthiest, most disgusting secrets with each other. But remember, even when Kerry was running against Bush, there was basically Skull and Bones versus Skull and Bones.
That was the choice, wasn't it?
People don't realize we just get the show. We get the TV edited version of garbage.
Yeah. Well, we've seen something different this time, though, haven't we? Let me ask you this. This is my theory. I keep boring my guests with my theory. My theory is that because of a very successful independent media all through the mid to late 90s, you were there at the very beginning. Because of a robust independent media, and writers like David Icke, you mentioned David earlier on, and others, I think by the turn of the millennium, so once we got into 2001, we had September the 11th then. Because of September the 11th, and again because of the work of the independent media on that, you again and others, not me because I came to this some years later, I think people had begun to see through the two-party system, the politics and all of that, what a nonsense it is, how it's all an illusion designed to keep us plugged into it, while the banksters and the elitists do what they want. And I think the empire has struck back with Donald Trump. Trump is the response to people waking up to the system, because we have never been more engaged and more interested in politics than we are now.
Well,
Trump is the man, right?
Good side benefit, the only good side benefit. I mean, we have farmer suicides in this country are up 64%. Okay. Farmers say he's killed every market they had. Okay. Here we are doing a socialist bailout of the farmers when we have a Republican Party saying they're against socialism. And to me, if we're paying our taxes to the farmers because of Trump's mistake, why do we have to pay for the produce that they have nowhere to sell? If we're paying for it in taxes and bailouts, we should get that food for free. Meanwhile, they're cutting school lunch programs if kids can't pay, $5 a day to have school lunch.
He's bragged a lot, Donald Trump, on the poverty issue, which is massive. And it's crazy here, families here. We know, and I know in Salford, and I've only been in Salford a few months, and I talk to people, and nobody has any idea what I do. I'm not going to pretend. The show is popular around the world, as yours is in places, but ultimately we're not the BBC. It's not that often that somebody says to me, "Oh, are you the guy?" It happens, but not that often. So I speak to people in Salford, and they say, "Look, what's going on?" People in families that have got mum and dad are working, but they can't make ends meet. They're going to food banks. So Trump, it's the same. I believe it's the same in your neck of the woods. They brag about Trump bringing more jobs, but they are shitty, low-income jobs, 0 hours contracts like we have here in the UK, and they are bumping up those employment figures in the US as well. It's in a terrible state. Am I right?
Well, they've been bumping up those figures for a long time. But, here it's the same thing, bad paying jobs, if any. We have a lot of right to work states, which means you have the right to work, but not get paid what you should be getting paid. There's no benefits, there's no health care, there's nothing. So it's another form of slavery. Prices are going up like crazy to the normal average person.
Wages stagnant.
But, to judge our economy by the stock market, knowing full well that 86% of Americans are not in the stock market, means nothing to the majority of us.
Yeah, it's the same here.
The reality on the street is, I'm watching my food bill and I buy the same food. I'm vegetarian, so it's like I know what I need. So every week it's basically the same vegetables and whatnot. But I've watched my food bill go up. I would say it's gone up at least 30%. And everybody else at the grocery store is complaining. Even the person checking you out is complaining because they see it too. So, if people want to be dumb enough to believe that China is paying these tariffs, they better wake up quick. But, another little fun fact about America is that 32 million Americans are illiterate, Richie. In this day and age, 32 million. That's 16% of America.
I was going to say it's about a sixth. I was going to say 96%, a sixth. Yeah, wow. Is that right? Wow.
Right. So, when I was reading through Donald Jeffries' book, which I can't put down, Crimes and Cover-Up in Our History, and that interview is on my site now, and you need a subscription to hear that and 600 others, which I consider my site a total education. When you look at his book in the 1700s, Richie, the two-party system was already recognized as corrupt. The people were unhappy. You also, at the same time, 30% of America was illiterate then. And that's, 300 years ago. How could it be possible that we have so many people that are illiterate? And these people vote, and these people have children.
Because it's by design. You're right. It's by design. It's by design.
It's always been by design, and that's, it's something I've covered through all the years on my show. Nothing in this country or anything in politics ever happens by accident. It's all by design.
Schools,
the dumbing down of America is complete.
Schools should only be concerned, in my humble opinion, with teaching children how to read and how to write. Maybe introduce a little bit of geography, maybe introduce a bit of creative writing, maybe introduce nature studies or environmental studies or whatever. But today in this country, we've only got about 3 minutes left. Today in this country, I wanted to get into this tonight myself, but I'll wait till the weekend. We're more concerned about whether or not 4 and 5-year-olds know about gender identity, about sexual identity, and all of that, which I have no problem with any of that. Of course I don't. As a socialist, I don't care what people do. Everybody should be allowed live with whom they want to live with and live their lives the way they want. But rather than be concerned about whether the children can read and write, we're more concerned now about what children think about social issues and gender issues, which is insane. It's insane.
But are we really concerned, or are we getting the Pavlov treatment? Here's a topic for you people to fight over. Well, we continue to rob you blind.
Well, we continue to rob you blind. I know you've not apologized, but you should never apologize for Meria.net to be subscription. Because it's worth it. I recommend Meria Heller's radio show. It's fantastic. As she said, there is an archive there of information from men and women, some of them not with us anymore, sadly, but very valuable interviews that Meria has conducted over the years with researchers, writers, thinkers, academics, scientists. Fantastic stuff. Go to Meria.net and check her out if you haven't done before. I love having you on. I'll give you the absolute final word before we wrap it up for today, and I'll be glad to come back on in a couple of weeks and give your listeners the lowdown on Brexit.
Absolutely,
if they want to hear
it. You're my man. You're my man in the UK.
I'm the reporter.
Listen, here's my grand finale, my last speech. There's a lot of information on the internet, so there's no excuse for people being stupid. But a lot of the information now is just programmed. It's garbage. So if you find a show like Richie's, you find a show like mine, we appreciate your support, but you will also know what you need to know, because I've always been a believer in I'd rather know than not know. And stay out of fear, because that's the energy of this planet. That's what they want us to do. They want us to be so afraid we beg them to take care of us, and that's when it'll be over.
Brilliantly said, Meria. Thanks for coming on today. We could have done another hour on another 20 subjects. There's no two ways about that. Meria.net, Meria.net is where you'll find her. I'll be in touch with you in the next couple of days, of course, on email.
Great. Thanks so much, Richie.
No, thanks for all your help, Meria. Thanks a lot. Love it. Have a great weekend. The brilliant Meria Heller live on the Richie Allen Show for Thursday, September 5th, 2019. Meria.net, that's the email, that's the website. So you'll find all these interviews and her radio program as well. That's about it for me. today. Thanks for that. For listening today, I should say. The radio programme, Sunday to Thursday, Sunday morning 11 o'clock UK time, Monday to Thursday 5 o'clock. And I do the YouTube live streams in the AM Monday to Thursday at 9:30. You've got to get used to that. You won't be hearing from me again until Sunday morning. I'll be back with you for Sunday View on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. UK time. I look forward to that, where we look through the Sunday newspapers. Who knows what will have happened at Westminster? In the meantime, it's moving at a pace, this whole Brexit betrayal story. Let me recommend Meria.net, Meria.net. Check her out. Go to truthjihad.com. Thank you so much to Kevin Barrett. And by the way, let me say congratulations to Hayden Hewitt and his lovely wife Margaret, who today celebrate their 12th anniversary. Now, they've been together longer than 12 years, but they were married today 12 years ago. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, Hayden Hewitt, and another brilliant mind. Check out triggerwarning.tv, Hayden and Graham Booth. Congratulations, Hayden and Margaret. Have a fantastic... They won't be listening to this, of course. They're having a meal and a few drinks somewhere this evening, Hayden Hewitt there. Lovely jubbly. That was the Richie Allen Show. I am Richie Allen. Speak Sunday. Look after yourselves and one another. And do, from time to time, disengage from the madness and spend some time outdoors with your loved ones. That's an order. Bye.